He carried her out of the house in the dark while her mother was still at work. He drove her 15 minutes down a Missouri highway. He kept the lights off inside. He never said a single word. And when it was over he burned the evidence, drove home and went to sleep. Then the next morning he was one of the first people to show up and help search for her. For 7 days he stood next to investigators. He answered questions. He pointed fingers. He offered to wear a wire. He cried. He prayed. And not one person suspected him. So here is the question that should bother you before we even get into this case. What does a guilty man look like when he is performing innocence perfectly? And how do you catch someone who already knows exactly how an investigation works because he is standing inside of it? This is the story of Rowan Demaya Ford. 9 years old. Stella, Missouri. And this case will leave you with questions that no courtroom has ever fully answered. If you are new here, welcome to Midnight Crime 247. Hit subscribe right now because we cover the cases that demand to be heard and we do not flinch. Drop a comment with where you are watching from. This case traveled far and the people who loved Rowan deserve to know her story reached every corner of the world. Stella, Missouri is a town of fewer than 150 people. Let that number sit for a second. 150. That means everyone knows your name. Everyone knows your car. Everyone knows which lights are on in which house on any given night. There are no strangers in Stella. There are no secrets either. A bicycle goes missing and the whole street knows before sundown. So when a child vanishes from her bedroom in the middle of the night, what follows should be simple. In a town that small, someone always sees something. Except this time nobody did. Rowan Ford was 4 feet of absolute joy in a Barbie pink bedroom. Her teachers ran out of words trying to describe her. One simply said she was everybody's friend. Another called her a little ray of sunshine, and they did not mean it as a polite throwaway. They meant it as a specific daily observable truth. On Sunday mornings she showed up to Stella Baptist Church before the pastor did. Not because anyone told her to. Because she wanted to be there in case someone needed help. That was the kind of child she was. But there were things about Rowan's life that never made the news. Some mornings she arrived at school without socks in the middle of a Missouri winter. Her hair was sometimes matted and unwashed. Teachers noticed and said nothing publicly for years. On the very last morning anyone at school ever saw her, a teacher named Tammy spent 30 minutes brushing her hair and pulling it into a neat ponytail before class began. That afternoon Tammy spotted Rowan skipping alone down the hallway. She looked so happy, Tammy later said. Like everything was great with her. Tammy had no way of knowing that was the last act of care that little girl would ever receive while she was still alive. Now let us go back to the night of November 2, 2007. Because this is where everything begins. And this is where the first crack in the story appears. 3 men. 1 small house. And a 9-year-old girl asleep on the floor of her bedroom down the hall. David Spears was Rowan's stepfather. 25 years old. He and Christopher Collings had been friends for nearly a decade. Same area. Same farm work. Same circle. Earlier that year when Christopher needed a place to stay, David let him move into the basement without question. For months Christopher lived inside that house. He ate their food. He sat at their table. He helped Rowan with her schoolwork after dinner. She called him Uncle Chris. Let that detail land. Uncle Chris. Not a stranger. Not someone who had just entered this little girl's life. Someone she had lived alongside. Someone she trusted completely. By late October Christopher had moved out to a travel trailer on his family's farm in Wheaton. 10 minutes east of Stella along State Highway A, different town. Different county. Same people. That Friday evening the 3 men, including a mutual friend named Nathan Mahurin, met after work. Bought alcohol. went to David's house. At 8:30 that night Colleen's son Rowan's mother left for her overnight shift at Walmart. Rowan was asleep. The men kept drinking. Bought more. And at some point all three drove out to Christopher's trailer in Wheaton to keep the night going. Picture where that trailer sat. No main road. No close neighbors. Just a farm property outside a small town surrounded by fields and tree lines swallowed by Missouri darkness. No one watching. No one counting the hours. Here is the first thing that does not line up. Nathan Mahurin eventually decided he was done for the night. But instead of taking the direct route home along State Highway A, he took the back roads. Deliberately. Because he was too drunk to risk a police stop. The long way. The slow way. He dropped David off and was home by midnight. So ask yourself this. Who was left at that trailer after everyone else was gone? Christopher Collings. Alone. With a vehicle. And 15 minutes between him and a sleeping 9-year-old girl whose front door he had a key to. November 3rd. Colleen walked through her front door after her overnight shift expecting one thing. Rowan always ran to that door. Every single time without fail that little girl heard the handle turn and came flying down the hallway. Arms wide open. Full speed. Like her mother had been gone for years instead of hours. That morning the hallway was empty. The house was completely silent. Colleen searched every room. Then the yard. Then the street. She came back inside and woke David up. He was asleep on the couch. She asked where Rowan was. He barely opened his eyes. Said she went to a friend's house. Did not know which friend. Now pause right there. A 9-year-old girl has left the house alone at an unknown hour to an unknown location, and the stepfather who was supposed to be watching her does not know where she went. And his reaction is to go back to sleep. Colleen started calling. Every family she knew. Every house Rowan had ever visited. Every single time the answer was the same. No. We have not seen her. She told David they needed to call the police. David said no. He said Rowan would come home. He said Colleen was overreacting. Think about the psychology of that moment. This is not a man who is groggy and confused. This is a man who is actively discouraging an emergency response to a missing child. Behavioral analysts would call that suppression of urgency. It is one of the clearest early warning signs in cases like this. By 6:50 that evening, nearly 10 hours after Colleen first came home, she called 911 herself. Within the hour an Amber Alert went out. And within that same hour almost everyone in Stella was outside. Flashlights moving through fields. Voices calling her name into the dark. Strangers searching alongside neighbors. 150 people and every single one of them outside. Newton County Sheriff Chris Jennings arrived at the house and started asking questions. And the very first thing that raised a flag was David. His story kept shifting. First Rowan was asleep when he left. Then maybe she had asked to go to a friend's place. Then only after investigators pushed he admitted he had gone out a second time that night. At 1:30 in the morning. He called his mother, borrowed her car and was gone for 5.5 hours. 5.5 hours. With no clear explanation. In the middle of the night. On the same night his 9-year-old stepdaughter disappeared. Jennings would later say, "We caught him in several lies." His story changed multiple times. He did not report Rowan missing for 8 to 10 hours after she was gone. David was looking like the primary suspect. Every investigator in that room thought so. The sheriff thought so. The FBI thought so. And that collective certainty about David is exactly what Christopher Collings was counting on. When investigators found Christopher in the parking lot of a local restaurant on November 4th, he was cooperative. Concerned. Polite. He gave a clean account. The drinking. The pool table. The trailer. He said he had stayed in and gone to sleep after the others left. He said he only found out Rowan was missing when police told him. Those were the exact words deputies used to describe him. Cooperative. Concerned. Polite. That same evening he drove to Colleen's house. Knocked on the door. Asked how the search was going. Offered to help. When the FBI stepped in on November 5, Christopher stepped forward to meet them without being asked. He agreed to a polygraph. He agreed to a computer voice stress analysis. He sat across from federal investigators and pointed his finger directly at David Spears. Said David's alibi was not truthful. Said he believed David was involved. Then he went one step further. He offered to wear a wire. He did not just offer to help. He volunteered to become the hunter. To walk back into David's life wired up and extract a confession. He positioned himself as the loyal friend willing to sacrifice that friendship for justice. But here is what that really means. An innocent man answers questions. An innocent man does not architect the investigation around himself. He does not redirect. He does not perform. Christopher was not just cooperating. He was controlling. Managing every interaction to keep the spotlight aimed somewhere else. He was the only person in that investigation who already knew the answer to every question being asked. Chief Clinton Clark had known Christopher since he was a young boy. 17 years. He had watched him grow up. He had been the person Christopher called when his mother died. Real history. Real trust. On November 5, Christopher flagged Clark down during a routine patrol. He talked about the search. Said he was helping wherever he could. But Clark noticed something. Christopher was not his normal self. Jittery. Unsettled. And when Clark looked directly at him, Christopher looked away. In 17 years he had never had trouble holding Clark's gaze. Clark contacted the FBI that afternoon. And what they told him next defined the rest of the investigation. If Christopher Collings was ever going to break, it would not be in an interrogation room. It would not be under bright lights with federal agents. It would be with Clark. Because Christopher did not fear Clark. He trusted him. And the man he trusted most was now the man working hardest to uncover what he had done. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with "still here," because what comes next is where this case takes a turn that no one in that investigation saw coming. For 6 days the search found nothing. On November 8, a Newton County death investigator named Mark Bridges spent the day with David under FBI supervision. He tried something simple. He asked David to think like Christopher. If you were Chris, where would you take her? David paused. Then he said, let's go look at some places. The first place David led him to was a sinkhole in the woods of McDonald County. A place called Fox Cave. They drove south. Narrow roads. Dense tree lines. No buildings. No people. David led Mark off the road and stopped near a heavily wooded area. No trail. No marker. Just trees and beyond them a hole in the earth. Fox Cave was not a cave in any traditional sense. Just a sinkhole open at the top, dropping straight down into cold Missouri darkness. Mark stood at the edge and felt everything shift. He saw items near the opening he could not immediately identify. Something about the specific way David had led him here told him they were standing at the end of a very long search. Subconsciously he later said, I think David wanted to be found out. At 8 in the morning on November 9, deputies arrived at Fox Cave with flashlights. They looked over the edge. 20 feet below the surface on a narrow rock ledge inside that sinkhole was a child's body. Rowan was covered in leaves and debris. Found in a state of undress. There was a ligature mark around her neck. She had been there for 6 days. 6 days while her mother sat on porch steps waiting for any news. 6 days while her community searched fields. 6 days while the man who put her there stood at her mother's front door asking how the search was going. The autopsy confirmed she had been assaulted before she was killed. Cause of death was ligature strangulation. She was 9 years old. Chief Clark heard the news on the radio that morning. Before he could process it, his office called. Christopher Collings had already come by asking for him. Wanted to know what time Clark came on duty. Said it was urgent. The FBI reached Clark immediately. Find him. Tell him they found Rowan. Watch what happens next. But Christopher was already gone. Clark drove through Wheaton looking for him. Nothing. Then his phone rang. It was Christopher. And the first words out of his mouth were not about Rowan. They were, "Are you following me in a gray minivan?" He had been driving in circles for hours. Convinced he was being watched. Trying to shake surveillance. This was not grief. This was not shock. This was a man who had spent 7 days managing a performance, and now that the body had been found, the performance was collapsing from the inside. Clark told him to come to the station. Christopher refused. He would only meet in private. When they finally got into the patrol car, Clark delivered the words the FBI had asked him to say. "Son. It's over. We found Rowan's body this morning." Christopher's head dropped. His eyes filled. Clark still believed David had done this. So he pressed gently. "Tell me what David did. Tell me what you saw." Christopher looked at him with an expression Clark had never seen on his face. Not guilt. Not relief. Something heavier than both. The face of a man who had been carrying something for 7 days and had finally run out of road. They drove to Munn Bridge. Quiet and isolated. When they stepped out, Christopher extended both hands toward Clark. Wrists together. Waiting. Clark told him that was not necessary. Christopher looked at him and said, "For what I'm about to tell you, you will." He sat on the slope near that bridge and he started to talk. He said he knew the moment Nathan chose the back roads home that he had time. Nathan was drunk and scared of a DUI stop, so he took the long way. That added enough time for someone taking State Highway A, the faster direct route, to get back to Stella first. Christopher took State Highway A. He drove fast. He got to the house before either of them made it back. He went inside. Walked down the hallway. Rowan was asleep on the floor. He picked her up without making a sound. Carried her outside. Put her in his truck. She did not wake up. Not during the lift. Not during the drive. Not until he was already back at the trailer in Wheaton. And by then it was too late. He kept the lights off inside. He did not speak a single word. He did not want her to recognize his voice. This was not a man who lost control in a moment of impulse. This was someone who had thought about the timing. The route. The silence. The darkness. But he had not accounted for the moon. It was a clear November night. And when Rowan turned her head and looked back over her shoulder, the moonlight did what Christopher's careful planning could not prevent. She saw his face. She recognized him. The man who had lived in her house. The man who helped her with homework. The man she had called Uncle Chris since she was old enough to trust someone. Christopher told Clark that he freaked out. He reached into the bed of an old pickup truck on the property and found a coil of rope. Rowan struggled. He kept the rope tight. She stopped struggling. She fell. And he kept it tight even after she stopped moving. He put her body in his truck. Considered Munn Bridge, but decided she would be found too quickly there. Drove to Fox Cave in McDonald County. carried her to that sinkhole and dropped her in. He drove home. Found blood on his mattress and his clothing. He burned Rowan's pajama pants, her underwear, and the rope in the wood stove. He rolled up the mattress and stuffed it into a 55-gallon drum. He dragged that drum into the barn, set it on fire, and closed the doors so no one would see the smoke. Then he went to bed. And the next morning he was one of the first faces at the search. Clark drove Christopher to the station, where Christopher repeated the entire confession to deputies from Barry County, Newton County, and the FBI. Every detail. Every step. The same story told the same way without contradiction. The investigators were stunned. Not because of the confession, but because for 7 days every single one of them had been certain David Spears was the killer. They had built their entire theory around David. Christopher in their minds had been a witness at most. They were wrong about everything. So they brought David back in. And David, now knowing Christopher had confessed, broke completely. He told investigators a story that stopped everyone in the room. He said when he got home that night he checked Rowan's room and found her gone. He said he knew immediately that Christopher had taken her. So he drove to Christopher's trailer. And when he got there he said he saw what was happening. And instead of stopping it he joined in. He said Christopher handed him the rope. He said he was the one who finished it. 2 men. 2 confessions. Both admitting to the same crime. Both placing themselves at the same location. Completely irreconcilable versions. Christopher insisted David was never there. Not for a single moment. Forensic evidence placed Christopher at the scene with certainty. But nothing placed David. Not a hair. Not a fiber. Not one definitive trace. And then there were the cadaver dogs. 3 separate cadaver dogs all hit on the car David borrowed from his mother that night. The car he drove for 5.5 hours with no explanation. Which means at some point Rowan's body had been inside that vehicle. So whose hands put it there? Let us talk about the theories, because this is where the case gets complicated in ways that no court has ever fully resolved. Theory 1, based on verified evidence and Christopher's confession. Christopher acted entirely alone. He planned the timing. He took State Highway A. He got to the house first. He killed Rowan alone when she recognized him. He disposed of her body alone. He burned the evidence alone. David's confession was false. A panicked attempt by a guilty-feeling man who knew he had failed to protect his stepdaughter and whose story contained no corroborating physical evidence whatsoever. The cadaver dog hits on the car could be explained if Christopher transported the body using that vehicle without David's presence. This is the version the prosecution ultimately accepted, and it is the version supported by all physical forensic evidence on record. Theory 2, supported by cadaver dog evidence and David's confession but not by physical forensics. David Spears was present at some point during or after Rowan's death. He drove to the trailer. He saw what Christopher had done. And either he participated or he helped move the body or he helped cover it up. The cadaver dog hits suggest Rowan was in that car at some point. If Christopher acted entirely alone, how did her body end up in a vehicle Christopher never borrowed? The answer to that question has never been definitively established in any court filing. Theory 3, built on behavioral analysis. Christopher and David had known each other for nearly a decade. They operated in the same circle. They made decisions together that night, including where to drink and when to leave. It is possible that what happened to Rowan Ford was not Christopher acting on a solo impulse but the result of a shared decision made in a dark trailer outside a small Missouri town. The evidence was not strong enough to charge 2 men. But absence of prosecutable evidence is not the same as absence of involvement. What is verified? Christopher Leroy Collings was convicted of first-degree murder. The physical forensic evidence supported that conviction. Every appeal was denied. The Missouri Supreme Court. The U.S. District Court. The Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. The United States Supreme Court. One by one the doors closed. What remains unresolved? The cadaver dog hits. David's confession. 5.5 hours of unaccounted time. And one question that no trial has ever answered out loud. On December 3, 2024 at the Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Bonne Terre, Missouri, Christopher Leroy Collings ate his final meal. A bacon cheeseburger. Breaded mushrooms. Tater tots. A chef salad. At 6:10 that evening the sentence of the court was carried out. Christopher Collings was pronounced dead. He had lived 17 years longer than Rowan Ford. Rowan's mother Colleen attended the execution as a witness. Rowan's sister Arian, who was 18 when her little sister was killed, spoke to reporters from her home in Alabama in the days before. She said, "A part of me died when my sister died. I did lose my ray of sunshine." She said Christopher deserved to die, but lethal injection felt too easy. She could not even imagine the pain Rowan felt. A 9-year-old girl. She did not have a fighting chance. Newton County Sheriff Chris Jennings submitted a personal request to attend the execution himself. He had carried something in his pocket since November 2007. Something he never put away. Never left at the office. Never locked in a drawer. Rowan's school ID. He later said, "I have worked hundreds of homicides in my career. This is the one that will always stay with me." Christopher's written final statement was read aloud afterward. "Right or wrong, I accept this situation for what it is. To anyone that I have hurt in this life, I am sorry. I hope you are able to get closure and move on. But here is what closure actually looks like in this case." David Spears pleaded guilty to child endangerment and hindering prosecution. He was sentenced to 11 years. With time already served, he was released in March 2015 at 32 years old. Shortly after his release, while still on probation, he was hired by the Missouri State Public Defender's Office. The same office that had represented both him and Christopher Collings. He worked there for 1 year and 8 months. When a reporter contacted him at that office in December 2024, he said, "Ma'am, you called me at work. I have no comment. Please don't call my place of work again." As of early 2025, David Spears continues to work for the state's public defender office. The man whose car 3 cadaver dogs identified. The man who was gone for 5.5 hours in the middle of the night and could not explain where. The man whose story changed 4 times. The man who confessed and then watched those charges disappear. Still working. Still walking through a door every morning. And Rowan Ford never made it to 10 years old. She never got to ride that blue bicycle into a summer she was old enough to remember. Her Barbie pink bedroom sat empty. And her school ID carried in the pocket of a sheriff who never forgot her is the closest thing to justice that actually looks and feels like what the word is supposed to mean. So here is the question that this case leaves behind, and it is the one that should sit with you long after this video ends. If Christopher Collings truly acted alone that night, then how did Rowan Ford end up inside a car he never touched, belonging to a family he had no connection to? And if David Spears knows more than what any courtroom ever heard from him, then what exactly does it mean that the state employs him to defend people accused of crimes? 2 confessions. 1 execution. 1 man free. 1 little girl at the bottom of a sinkhole for 6 days while the person who put her there stood next to her mother and asked how the search was going. Rowan deserved better than partial justice. She deserved all of it. If this case stayed with you, drop her name in the comments. Just write Rowan. That is all. Let this comment section be a place where people who watched this know her name and say it out loud. Subscribe to Midnight Crime 247 because we are not done. We cover the cases that the system closes too early and the stories that deserve more than a file number and a closing date. Share this video with one person tonight. Not because of the algorithm. Because Rowan Ford was everybody's friend and she deserved a world full of people who refused to forget her. She was 9 years old. She had a blue bicycle and a Barbie pink bedroom and a teacher who brushed her hair into a ponytail on the last morning of her life. She was everybody's friend. Be one of them.